like she said, I've been in the Autism Academy now, well, for the past 4 years. Prior to starting in that classroom, they invited me to attend Teacch training in Grand Forks to help with working with those students. So before I started, just kind of wanted an idea of how many of you kind of knew about Teacch. So who in here has heard of Teacch? Okay, has anyone else gone to the training?
It's been a long time.
Does anyone in here know that they are using some kind of Teacch strategy or part of the Teacch method in their classroom? Okay, what parts are you using?
Like the workspaces.
The workspaces. Okay, the work system. Anyone else? Okay. Preschool, you may not know this, but you're using a lot of the Teacch strategies in your area as well. But just so you know, I got all of this information from the presentation itself in the slides. So if you have any questions, please let me know following the presentation. So what is Teacch? Teacch itself stands for as a treatment and education of autistic and communication-related handicapped children. It was developed at the University of North Carolina in the 1970s. So it's been around for a while now. It was developed by Eric Schopler and his colleagues. The Teacch method can be implemented in any school setting, so there are definitely aspects of this that can be implemented if a student is more mainstreamed. However, a lot of these definitely can be used in more of a self-contained room. So we use a lot of this in the Autism Academy. I would imagine Carl Ben could use some of this in their more autism programs. Teacch methods are based on the premise that people with autism are predominantly visual learners. So pretty much everything that I'm going to share today definitely gears towards those visual learners. They use so many visuals in Teacch. So intervention strategies focus on the visual and physical structure, schedules, work systems, and then task organization. So providing structure. At the core of Teacch is the idea of structured teaching. Structured teaching is comprised of 3 components. We'll have the physical organization of the classroom, schedules, the visual schedules, and then the teaching methods. The developers of the Teacch method have based their model on the idea that to effectively teach a child with autism, you want that child to know where they are going to be or where they should be, what they are supposed to be doing, and how they are supposed to be doing it. So all of the visuals that we use are going to really be showing them these 3 things. And you want to increase their independence as much as you possibly can. So you want these students to be as independent as they possibly can be throughout their day. Now, a large portion of my Teacch training was on autism, but I feel like we've done a lot on autism in the past couple of years, so I don't want to include too much information about that, as long as we have only an hour. But I did include a little bit of information that is going to directly relate to the Teacch strategies. So, with understanding autism, children with autism definitely have those social differences. We can see, with more and more research, we're finding that even infants of children who are eventually diagnosed with autism, that they, even as infants, don't have that eye contact that typical neurotypical infants do. So it's something we can see from very early on, those social differences. As they get older, we see more issues with eye contact, emotional empathy, social initiation, and then social reciprocity. And so anyone working with autism, or a student with autism, definitely can see some of those struggles. They have communication differences. Again, we see those communication differences from very early on with a child. I have a student who I started working with in 3rd grade, and by the time I worked with him, he certainly had some holes in his language abilities and his language skills. But to a typical listener, to a typical communication partner, he probably would come off as a very typical 3rd grader as far as language went. And it wasn't until I'd worked with this student for a while that I found that he was completely nonverbal until he was 4 years old. So for a long time, or from the start, he struggled with communication. Their verbal skills are impaired. Receptive language can be very difficult for children with autism. And that's a lot where these visuals play a part, is because they struggle with that receptive language, or what they're understanding. The process of communication is difficult, as well as their initiation and the reciprocity of communication. We also have a lot of behavior differences that we see with children with autism. Their reaction to their environment can cause behaviors. A lot of times I think this stems from their ability to communicate, or their lack of ability to communicate. Sometimes fear and anxiety from students can cause behavior issues. My husband is fascinated with autism, so he's always bringing me research articles relating to autism. And the most recent one he showed me was that they're treating children with autism with anxiety medication. And they looked at several aspects kind of across the board. But one of them was a lot of communication skills, and they found that with that anxiety medication, those students actually had much better communication skills and some of those social skills. Children with autism often have higher anxiety. They can be very impulsive. I have a student right now I'm doing text with, and it's so hard once you got to the point where all those things are on the tray, because she's just diving for all of the items. She's very impulsive. Environmental inconsistencies and then sensory processing definitely affects behaviors as well. Children with autism often have some different language and thinking differences. They can be very distractible. When we're looking at the physical structure of a classroom, we try to limit the distractions for these students. They're very concrete thinkers. I think some of our students with higher functioning autism, we work on a lot of those figurative language pieces. They have difficulty with organizing and thinking. They have difficulty generalizing skills. So something to keep in mind as we're teaching a lot of these teach methods or teach strategies is that you might need to teach them across environments. Visual versus auditory learning. Again, they're very visual when it comes to learning. Their concept of learning and routines, and they are much less flexible in their learning. So the structured teaching approach to autism spectrum disorder. The Teacch approach to teaching children with autism spectrum disorder involves several aspects to increase these students' abilities to not only learn, but function in his or her environment with as much independence as possible. So again, we want them to be as independent throughout their day, in their environment, as we can possibly make them. The way in which the Teacch approach makes this happen is to adjust the system for each individual student. When I'm looking at the students we have in the academy right now, we are using a lot of these Teacch strategies, but we're definitely gearing them towards each student, because each student is so different. So something when working with your students as well is you want to individualize everything for each student. We want to use the strengths and interests of each student. I have a student right now who loves everything to do with holidays and her birthday. So many of my lessons and lesson plans revolve around birthdays. So trying to use as much of their interest as possible throughout their day. And then using physical structure and visual schedules in order to make concepts very visual and concrete. Aspects are meant to increase the student's independence in all settings. All right, so like I said, we're going to go over physical structure, we'll go through schedules, and then we'll go through that kind of work task system. So the first area we'll look at is the physical structure of the classroom. When we're setting up the classroom or any area, when working with a student with autism, what you're going to want to do is you're going to identify specific areas to add meaning and context to the area or the environment. And you're going to do this using either physical barriers or more abstract barriers. But with each area, you want each area to have a very specific purpose that you're going to teach the student to use that for. And we do this to control distractions in learning environments and to help organize the student's behavior. Like I said, we're going to use either concrete or abstract boundaries, and I have examples of what all of this will look like. But with the concrete boundaries, you're going to use things like bookshelves or filing cabinets or something like a rug to show that physical boundary, whereas a more abstract boundary might be a line of tape on the ground to show that this area is meant for something versus another area. You might have a rope across an area to show a different boundary. And just you want to show where the area is going to begin versus where it ends, and make sure that you teach your students specifically what each area is for. So this is just an example of what a classroom might look like that's set up with this Teacch method. You can see that they have several specific areas set up. They have the bookshelves in between, again to limit distractions. They have a less concrete barrier right here with a box that's just going to show the different area. We have the rug right here, which is going to be maybe used for more group time, and that kind of signals to the students that this is meant for group time. You might have your lunch table, you might have like a group work table. Now I'm going to tell you, when looking for pictures, I looked really hard for high school, middle school pictures, and that's a lot harder to find. So this definitely can be used for older children, but you'll find that a lot of my pictures either are from our classroom at the academy at an elementary level, or just ones that I found. So this signifies that this is more of a reading corner. You have the couches blocking off, and then as well as the rug to show that this is where we are meant to read. This is a play area, again with the mat to show the boundary here, that this is where the play area is. I know it's hard to see, but there's also a sign here that says that this is the play area. Again, bookshelves to just limit distractions in this workspace. I know our classroom has a lot of just barriers that we can put up around the classroom to kind of section off the different areas. You might have a different section for your computer space or for keyboarding or breaks. This is something I think we see in a lot of typical classrooms as well as our special ed classrooms, is a rug for circle time. And a lot of these rugs I think even have our little individual spaces to show students where they are expected to be. You might have a lunch table. I know in our academy right now, students have learned pretty quickly where their snack table is. So when you show them that picture, they know to go right to that picture, or right to that table with their snack or lunch. Things to remember, again, you're going to want to individualize. Right now in the academy, we have some students who just have a regular desk in the classroom. They're able to work that way. We have a lot of study carrels because a lot of students need that barrier to avoid distractions. And then we have one little guy whose desk area has the bookshelves to completely section off that area because he knows that once I go in here, this is my workspace, and then when I come out, that's when I can have my break. And again, we want the student to know when they are in this area what they are expected to do. So teaching them what each area is for. So when you're considering setting up your classroom, some areas you might consider are a one-to-one workspace, or when you are working with that student one-to-one. An independent workspace, we'll get into that independent work system in a little bit, but you want a space for that student to just kind of work on their own. A break, play, leisure space for older students, that might be more of a computer break. Group work, snack, computer centers, and then an area for the student belongings. All right, so we have physical structure within a classroom, but we also have visual structure. Individuals with autism are inconsistent in their ability to follow verbal directions. We know that receptive language can be difficult for students on the spectrum. So we want to kind of limit some of those verbal directions. They are strong visual learners, however However, they may not naturally scan for and use visual information that is present. I think even we as adults look around in our environment to find out what we're supposed to be doing or where we're supposed to be going. The first time you ever went to an airport, you didn't have to be taught to be looking out to where you needed to go for your gate. Whereas a student with autism, you can have as many visuals in a room as possible, but unless they've been taught what each of those visuals mean, they aren't going to be able to use them effectively. We use visual structure all the time, and that includes our children, our neurotypical children, as well as adults. So here's just a couple of examples of how we use visual structure. Here's an example of visual organization. Anyone could go into this desk drawer and pretty easily find whatever they're looking for, whereas if everything was just kind of thrown in, it would be a lot more difficult to find what you're looking for. This is a visual you might see on an airplane. If you're ever sitting in that emergency row, the flight attendant might come over and give you a 2-minute spiel on what you're supposed to do in an emergency, but they're really relying on these visuals for you to learn or to know what you're supposed to do. Our neurotypical children use a lot of visuals too. This would be an example of a child using this visual to put together a Lego toy. My 3-year-old even, for Christmas she had gotten a new toy and she was all excited to use it. And I said, well, you're going to have to wait, I have to go do this. And I came back and she had pulled it out of the box and she had looked at the visual schedule and she had put that toy together, or the visual directions that came with it. And she had put that toy together all by herself by following that, even though no one had ever sat down and taken the time to teach her how to use visual directions. All right, so there are going to be 3 types of visual structure. There's going to be visual organization, visual instruction, and then visual clarity. So visual organization organizes the workspace. So again, kind of like that picture of the drawer that we saw, that's how that drawer was organized, really helped with, for someone to know where things go. It organizes your materials. So if you have like a jacket area or an area where students are expected to keep their belongings, by keeping that organized, students are going to know exactly where to keep their belongings. Organizes steps for completing an activity. Can organize students' behavior. And this can be used with learning activities, daily living activities, or leisure activities. So this would be an example of like a daily activity or a daily living activity. Most kids are going to take their materials, go to the lunch table, and be able to use everything. Whereas some students might need this visual of, okay, we have your utensils, you have your plates, you have your cup. This is kind of how you organize your lunch table. We use organization, visual organization, just like that drawer. I definitely have one of these in my kitchen to organize utensils. So this is an example of a work task, and we'll get more into that in a bit. But the way this is organized is we have a tray right here, and each of these little pieces has its own little spot. So instead of just throwing those pieces into a bowl and expecting the student to transfer them using the tongs, they have those organized, which is going to assist that student. This is another good example. Now this is something that might just be a good work task, but for students with autism, to put crayons in a box and just put the box away might be kind of difficult. So this can be more of a daily living skill as well. You have your crayon box here that is color-coded, so a student knows exactly where it goes. And the expectation is they put them in the box, they put the cover on the box, and they put the crayons away. You can also see that there is an outline here of where each of these components are going to go. So then if the student is setting this up himself, he knows exactly where each piece will go. This would be another task that you could work on in your classroom, but will be very functional as they grow up. Just learning how to address an envelope. You have the space for the address, the return address, and then the stamp, so they can practice that skill. We also have visual instruction. Visual instruction gives information about how to do an activity. It will identify the steps needed to do the activity. It will give you the order of steps to complete. Provides information about where to do the activity, and then identifies behaviors expected during the activity. And I'm sure a lot of these are things that you already do. So this again is another work task. I have a student right now who, as part of his speech time, would work with different toys because at this point he doesn't independently use toys. So we do activities like this where he takes Legos and is expected to use them in different ways. So hopefully he can go back. But this just shows exactly what he can do with the Legos and then put them in each box. So this is just a visual of how to complete a task. It has each of the steps listed here. Another play activity that has the different steps of how to put Mr. Potato Head together. This would be more of like a work task even if someday when they move on past school and they have a mesh bag here and they need each of the materials in each bag. So they have these directions of in each bag you will need each of these things. And this has some verbal directions which a lot of our students don't necessarily need all of those visuals. If you have a student who reads, you can very well have written directions as well, like this. So this student's task is to read the 5 pages and then write 3 new reading words in your reading journal. So again, make sure you're adapting this to whatever is appropriate for your student. Here's a visual, and we have a visual pretty similar to this right now in the Academy bathroom. But it just goes through the steps of what is expected, where that's expected to happen to go to the bathroom. Our social stories, a lot of times social stories have some great visuals. This is an example of what to happen or what to do during a lockdown drill. This is going to tell the student where they're going to go, what they're going to do, the steps of the drill, how to behave during that. And then the last part of the visual structure is visual clarity. And visual clarity just draws attention of the student to important and relevant information that they need to know. It emphasizes where to look and then clarifies what to do. The different parts of visual clarity you can use are labeling, color coding, outlining, and highlighting. So this is something that we probably see throughout the school is a lot of labeling. We see labeling on students' desks, on lockers, on cubbies. I know a lot of you said that you might have some visuals like this with the stop and go to label what's appropriate. Again, with something like this, you need to make sure that you're teaching your student what each of these mean. Because I think there are some drivers who don't know what this means, let alone our students who are still functioning. You might have a folder like this where you're just labeling what the student has left to do versus what they have already finished. Here's an example of color coding. I know it's hard to see, but here's Alec, Celeste, and Lotus. And this just shows that Alec's work is right up here in the top with the red bins. Celeste, her work is here in the yellow bins. And then Lotus has her work right here in the green bins. Outlining was another strategy. And for this task, it's to sort the tools. And we have the outline of the tools in order to tell the student which tools are going to go in each box. Again, this is going to be kind of like that color coding. I've seen a couple of tasks like this in the district. Here we have toothpicks, and the expectation is to put the toothpick into the appropriate colored hole. But you're also kind of highlighting where that hole is for the student to know exactly where it goes. For some of our older students who are reading, if you give them a whole page of text, that might be just too much information for them. So by using highlighting, we can kind of highlight that important information so they know what to draw out from the text. All right, and then we have schedules. Schedules are very important within the Teacch method as well. And Kim and Jolene touched a little bit on schedules. But schedules help identify the flow of the day. They support verbal directions, again. They help improve tolerance for changes that occur. So your student might know very well what happens on Monday, but maybe one Monday, instead of going to the library, they have a speaker. So by having that on their schedule, they can be prepared. Other times, things that are out of our control happen, and then sometimes that schedule can assist with preparing them for that change. And then the schedule shows sequence and organization of the day. Now I know we've talked about visuals in the past, but just as a little review, again, you're going to want to individualize the schedule for each individual student. So you're going to really want to use what's appropriate for each student. Here we have a schedule that has the items or the objects that are used within the schedule. This would be for a student who might not understand a photo or a line drawing. And here's a classroom and how it's set up. Now most of these students are able to use the line drawing, but this student, Christian, needs a little bit more, so he has the items. Most of our students in the academy this year are using photos for their visual schedules, and we have photos of different places that they will be going. If they're expected to do a work period, we have a picture of their each individual desk, or it might be whoever they're working with at that time, a picture of that person. We have line drawings again with just the symbols, whether it's board maker symbols or another type of symbol. And then again, you might have a student who understands written directions, and then in that case, you can do a schedule like this where it's just written out. Alright, so tips for best visual cue. Use concrete visual cues that the student understands. The student should understand this even if they are upset. So if you have a student who is getting upset, but it's time to transition, you still want that student to understand what is coming next. The schedule is to give them information. Use a clue that is too easy rather than one that is too abstract. So if you were questioning whether a student would be more appropriate to use pictures or photographs, or whether or not it would be more appropriate for them to use line drawings, you want to go with this simpler schedule, just so that you know that they understand what that is. And then pay attention to the length of the schedule. Again, you want to individualize that to each student. We have a lot of students using just first then schedules in the academy, but we also have a student who every single day, the minute she walks in the door, talks about going home. So for her, it's more beneficial to have the entire layout so she can see going home at the very end, and see just what she has to accomplish before that can happen. Again, we have the first then schedule. This might be for used for students who are difficult to motivate for work, where you have your less preferred activity followed by your more preferred activity. This schedule right here kind of highlights what the student is doing presently when it has the time for it, and then shows kind of the rest of the schedule, as well as having the pocket here for all done. We don't have it even right now using an electronic schedule, but I know in the past Alice has come out and helped us put some electronic schedules on their iPads or on even an iPod. So if you have a student who is kind of beyond that visual Velcro schedule, something like this might be more appropriate for them. Again, as Kim mentioned, I definitely would be lost without my Outlook. It's kind of the last thing I look at every day to be prepared for the next day. So something like this, even if this is appropriate for your student, this is definitely a great daily functional skill that they can carry on past school age. It's important for the students to know when to check their schedule. That was something that was kind of highlighted within our Teacch training, is how does your student know when they are expected to go look at their schedule? And then we also want students to know where they are in the sequence. So when to check their schedule, you need to develop some kind of system with your student to tell them when to go look at their schedule. And again, we've talked about how verbal directions can be very inconsistent with these students. So a lot of times, some kind of visual for them to know to go check their schedule can be helpful. So with this schedule right here, at the very top here, we have a little box, and it says check schedule. So with Morgan, what this teacher would do is they would give Morgan a visual that would probably match this visual here. She would take that wherever she is in the school. She would take that visual, walk over to her schedule, could put that check schedule in the top, and then she would look to see whatever comes next on the schedule. And then we also want students to know where they are in their schedule. So as they finish, we have paper clips here to remove items. So again, whether it's Velcro or some other way to remove the item. We've talked about how it's important to kind of incorporate the students' interests in throughout their day. So Bobby is super into dinosaurs. So his way of checking his schedule is to be given a picture of the dinosaur, and he comes over, he puts the dinosaur at the top of the schedule here, so then he can look to see what's next. And then again, he has the all done pocket to put that in there when he's done so that he knows what he's completed. This is a schedule that has just a dry erase marker along with it. There's the laminated schedule, so then as Sophia finishes things, she doesn't necessarily remove the item, but she can check it off so that she can follow along with her schedule. And then they also, in our Teacch training, had some great suggestions for what you can do if there is a change in a schedule. Some students, they might be able to handle just removing the item and putting the new item on the schedule. Some students that might not work as well. So with Anna here, she's supposed to have math, writing, and reading. And then all of a sudden, someone finds out that that's a change to the schedule. So she has my schedule change is put on top of what was previously scheduled. And then next to that is a visual of what is going to replace what originally was on there. But you do want to kind of show your students what that change is going to be. Some other things that might happen, sometimes you're not prepared for a change in the schedule. You might be doing reading and it takes twice as long as you expect it to. So you might want to have schedule or visuals like this just handy so that you can say, oh, sorry, we ran out of time. We aren't going to get to reading your story today. So again, the goals with having a visual schedule are going to be to increase independence, improve flexibility throughout the student's day, and then improve quality and functioning in the community. Especially with some of those, like the Outlook calendar or the electronic calendar. If those are things that this student can take with them after school to help them function in the community, that's kind of the goal. All right, so then the last thing we're going to talk about is the work activity system. So this is kind of, I think, one of the most well-known areas. I know a lot of the preschool SLPs as well as teachers might use kind of the work task boxes. The task box system can be used to teach young children with autism the beginning skills of how to work. These shoebox tasks can be also used with students who not necessarily have autism, but who are very low functioning. My mom worked in a classroom for many years with students, none of who had a diagnosis of autism, but they were all low functioning, and they used the same work task system. And what this does is this teaches students how to initiate a task or a work task, how to work through that task, and then how to complete the task. And that's something that's going to be important for them as they graduate from school and as they move on, that they are going to need to know how to work independently and initiate those tasks. So the individual work activity system is a systematic way to approach work or an activity. The individual work activity system encourages independence and it enables generalization of skills into other environments. The goal behind the work task system is for students to complete a series of tasks independently in a systematic manner. The tasks used within the independent work system should be tasks that the student is able to complete within or without the assistance of an adult. So what you are focusing on when you're using this work system is not for them to be learning something new, but you're purely working on initiating the task, completing the task, and then moving on to something else. So when you're deciding what tasks you want to use within this system, you want to choose tasks that you know the student can complete independently. So this system should tell students 4 different things. How much work that they are expected to do, what work they're expected to do, the concept of finished, and then what happens next. So when you have this set up, this is what should be answered for the students. And we'll go over all these 3 types, but the 3 types of work systems are going to be moving from left to right. There's going to be a matching system and then a written system. Okay, so this is kind of how you're going to have your work system set up. You're going to have to your left, or to the left of the student, you're going to have your tasks that you want them to complete. You're going to have the workspace for the student, and then next to the right of them is going to be where they're going to put their completed work. That can be just a cardboard box, that can be a basket, but somewhere for them to put their completed work. So the first system is just a moving left to right. Now this system is definitely going to have to be taught to the student. They're not going to naturally know that you're going to take the left task and move right. But what the student would do is you would lay the different tasks in boxes right next to each other, and then you're going to start with the left task. The student is going to take the task on the left, move it in front of them. They should be able to complete the task independently. You're going to choose something that they can do. And then when they have finished that, they're going to put it in the box that says they're completed. Then they will move from left to right to grab the next one, and then finally the last one. Okay, and then we also have a matching system. And for this system, what they're going to have is they're going to have a visual schedule. Now, this student right here really likes Toy Story, so they decided that the visuals that they were using were Toy Story symbols. It can be something more just shapes. It can be colored boxes. I have a student right now who I just have different colored squares, and he just attaches the different colors. If you don't have students going left to right, you do want them to go from top to bottom. So what this student does is he has his schedule right here. These are all Velcroed on, so he can remove them. He's going to stick it onto the box. He'll grab the box, he'll complete the task, and then he'll move to the end. And then the last symbol that he has right here is a trampoline. So that's showing him that when you have finished these tasks right here, then you get a chance to jump on the trampoline. Here's just another example of how you could set this up. We have numbers right here. So the student is going to match the numbers. We have drawers. And this is something we've done in the past in the autism room, is with drawers with the work. And you can put pretty much whatever kind of work that they are working on in these drawers. If you have students who can complete independently different worksheets, you could have smaller drawers that just stick a paper in so that they can complete that independently. The student has cars on his schedule that he's matching. This is kind of the way we had set up a couple years ago with all of our students. In our classroom, we had that individual work space, and in front of that, we had the bulletin board. And then each student had their name with their schedule, their independent work schedule, their symbols, all in front of them. And so when they came to do their individual work, they would sit down, they would know to find their name, and then they would do the work. And that was set up set that up in the morning so then when it was time for them to come do their independent work, it was just all set up. They could complete the work and then they would move on with their schedule. Oh, I don't know if this is what this says, but at the end of the schedule, what you might have at the end here might just be one of those check your schedule symbols, so that once they reach the end, instead of having a break, they might just have that check schedule symbol, and they'll go and they'll check their schedule to see what's next. Again, and then you might also have a written schedule. So here we have work alone. It's going to have the different tasks that he's expected to do. And then again, at the end of that work system, when he's completed those tasks, it just tells him to check his schedule. And then he also has a reminder to sit on your bottom while you work. This is actually a system that I have for one of my kiddos set up. This system works great for that individual teaching and that individual work system. I have a student who's really struggled with any kind of work period. So this actually came over from preschool with this kiddo. That this is the system. He has his different colors set up, and he knows that he has to take the blue, he matches that, he finishes the task, then we move on. And at the end here we have M&Ms because he's willing to work for 20 minutes for 2 M&Ms, which is awesome. Just a closer up view of that. So now I'm going to just show you some different examples of tasks that might work really well as part of this system. Here's some file folders. If you have students who are willing to work or who are able to complete file folders, they can be really good tasks for a system like this. Another file folder, just kind of adapted to that student. Here's a sorting activity. Again, this would all just be in the box. The student would grab the box. The expectation is for them to just match the different items to the pictures, and then they would move on. You're going to want to adapt your activities as well as how long it's going to take the activities to each student. So you might have a student who's going to take 3 minutes to get through all 3 activities. You might have a student who will work for 30 minutes, and you're going to slowly try to increase the amount of time they work independently. Looks like this one, they're just matching some site works on here, and then it has the little finished box when they finish those. A cutting task, if their student is working on cutting or can do that cutting independently. So a great resource for different tasks or boxes that you might work on with students is how do I teach this kid? And this whole book has full of ideas of tasks that you can do with students. And then the other way I typically get ideas on what to do with students is Pinterest, because if you type in Teacch work tasks, you'll get thousands of ideas of activities that you can do with your students. And again, adapt it to whatever is appropriate for your students. We had a student who was working on calculator skills, so that's what her work tasks were, where she just had different worksheets, and she would pull out the worksheet, she would complete it with her calculator, and then would finish it. And that's what she was working on during her independent time, because it was something she